I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the podcast, we talk about Carly Russell admitting that she made up her kidnapping story. We will be talking about Biden, cocaine, and the Secret Service, and so much more. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you on this fine day?
Outstanding.
You're actually in sitting.
I'm in sitting, but mentally I'm outstanding. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Got lots of chores to do. Makes me hot and tired.
That's what happens when you have a farm.
You make the mistake of buying a farm thinking, I'll just get a couple chickens and ducks and goats and...
Oh, that's what we're calling 8 chickens. A couple?
9, but yeah, just a few. I can't count, so...
Apparently I can't either. I keep saying 8.
Yeah, only
9.
1 died. We had 10 and then 1 died.
That's right. Poor little chicken.
Poor little chicken.
Did he die or did you guys eat him?
He died. He died at just a few days old.
Okay, I thought maybe it was a chicken nugget.
After he died, he was.
Little nugget.
Little nugget. Just like we got some duck. 2 duck died.
Would that be some ducats?
We got some ducats and some nuggets, and pretty soon, whatever the goat version is, just kidding.
Bah.
Mostly they just horn us.
Da-da.
Da-da, thud. So, have you ever faked your own kidnapping?
No.
There is a gal who decided that she would fake her own kidnapping. Caught the nation by storm. Miss Carly Russell has now admitted that she lied about her disappearance beside an Alabama freeway. She called 911 to report that there was a 3 or 4-year-old toddler wearing just Pampers and out on the side of the freeway. And while on this 911 call, the line doesn't go dead. The line stays open, but it's just silence after her initial conversation with the dispatcher. The police get there. They find her car. They find her cell phone. They find her keys. They find no toddler and no Carly Russell. A few days later, she walks home, walks into her front door, looking no worse for wear. So the police interviewed her. They sought more information. They did their investigation. Apparently she was Googling the movie Taken. She was looking into different elements of kidnappings and then kidnapped herself. So she has now admitted that it was a kidnapping hoax. There was no baby on the side of the road. And now there's questions as to where she was for 49 hours.
Did she get any money out of herself? Was there no ransom?
No ransom, no contact. She was just missing for 49 hours. At least that's what I've heard.
She married or single?
Single, I believe. She had a job. She was working. I believe she was also going to nursing school.
Maybe the pressures of nursing school and a job. Any kids?
That I'm not certain of. I don't believe so. I have not heard about a child, but it's a possibility.
All right, sounds like some stressor in her life may have caused her to flip her noodle for a few days, or a few hours anyway.
Just over 48 hours.
Or maybe she watched some crime mysteries and wanted a bunch of attention.
Wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe she was trying to impress somebody, trying to scare somebody. Maybe she got into an argument with her parents.
Oh, what would you do if I was kidnapped?
All kinds of factors. Would you still look for me, Dad, if I was kidnapped? Would you call the police? Would you help? There's a bunch of scenarios there to run through one's head. And nobody can get into the mind of a person because we just don't know.
Correct. We don't know. So possibly she might come out to say what was going on, whether it will be her version of the truth, the actual truth. somewhere in between. We won't know.
I think maybe she might be related to our president. Maybe she's in the beginning stages of dementia.
Oh, perhaps she does have dementia.
She doesn't know who she is or he is or they are.
Joe Biden doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he's at most of the time, unless he's at his vacation spot, which he seems to take a large number of vacations. He doesn't often seem to know where he is, where he's going. He has people who have to essentially drag him by the arm or coax him into going to the correct next location, even having to use the head of another state, the King of England, had to direct Joe Biden where to go while he was on his state visit there. I don't understand how people could look to him and say he is the best president ever.
It's because they know there is a pot of gold or there's cash at the end of the Biden rainbow. Because they will hook themselves up with companies like Raytheon, weapons companies, arms dealers, Democratic strategists, people that can bring them cash. So they will do and say anything because the end game is for them to enrich themselves. They don't care about the country. They don't care how we turn out because it's just another cycle of bad people being put in charge, and they're using a current puppet, or they're currently using a puppet to meet their goals. And when he's washed up, they'll throw him and Jill off to the side and then move on to the next person.
Okay, so you're saying Joe Biden is, in fact, a puppet for others to make their financial gains.
Absolutely.
Do you think Trump was a puppet?
No.
Do you think people still use their position for financial gain or will use their position for an eventual financial gain, even if they were under Trump?
You 100%.
You mean for instance, Dr. Deborah Birx was a top COVID advisor to Trump. And I understand she had a career leading up to being the COVID advisor. But she was the top COVID advisor under Trump, and now she is transitioning to her new job as the CEO of a pharmaceutical company.
Ooh, go figure. They're pretty smart people, aren't they?
Very smart people using their government insight to then become the head of a company. Now, do you think that she had to do the right things and say the right things while she was working for the feds in order to transition to that?
Oh, absolutely.
CEO?
That way she'd keep herself out of hot water.
Because if she said pharmaceuticals are bad, she's not going to have a job.
Nope. She wouldn't. All those folks have their tentacles deeply entrenched in these folks in D.C. She's no different, just like Fauci. Him and his side have, patents on things. He towed a line that is turning out to be mostly baloney. There was a lot of people that died during this thing. He had some good advice at the beginning of his career, not at the beginning of COVID. And I think 50 years of being in D.C. and working for the political machine, he lost his way.
I would have to agree. He definitely lost his way.
Because if you do some research and look at some of his early writings and some of his early talks and discussions, he actually had a lot to offer America and what his position in life was to be. And there's a stepping off point where he kind of took a right turn when he should have stayed straight or left, or basically he should have taken a left turn, not a right turn, depending on how you look at it. But he definitely made some mistakes in the latter part of his career. Not monetarily, because the guy's stacked with cash.
It seems he did just fine in that regard. In fact, during COVID, he made a large portion of his money. His net worth was made during COVID.
They always seem to. And we've talked about other politicians and other people that are back there in D.C. or at the state level here in California or Texas or North Carolina. They go in with good intentions. They come out with a lot of money and not so good intentions later in their life.
Well, and additionally, whether you had good intentions or not, a lot of the big pharma people ended up millionaires and billionaires through COVID.
Yes.
So you may have joined hoping to invent the next level pharmaceutical to help the world, and you turn into a multimillionaire or billionaire because you engaged with the U.S. government to create a shot that ultimately didn't do what you said it could do when it came out.
Well, that's because Operation Warp Speed was too fast.
Yeah, and in an area where you're dealing with human bodies, going as fast as possible is probably not the answer. Even though we might have wanted it, you can't just want it into fruition.
Well, it's because a panacea or a utopia is not reality. And like you've said on several occasions, everybody reacts different to medication. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all, contrary to popular belief. That's why you have side effects during the normal flu shot. You have side effects with cancer treatment. You have side effects with anesthesia. And we basically crammed down 300 million people's throats a one-size-fits-all.
Right. One of the things that I like to think about as far as, well, I don't like to think about it, I shouldn't put it that way, but one of the things that I have thought about is the number of people who would willingly say, I didn't react to it, and therefore you must take it. Even if you have a history with negative outcomes and medication, they would say those things like, well, I was fine, so you should have to take it. It's for the betterment of society that you have to take this shot. So you have people who are knowingly allergic to penicillin. They maybe had it and then had an allergic reaction. It's the same thing. Would you say, well, I did just fine when I got the penicillin shot, therefore you should have to get it too. I don't care that you've had a reaction to medication in the past. I was just fine.
So two things. Number one, I see those kind of people every day on public streets and on the freeway. They're the ones that are in the left lane, or you're in the left lane. They're in the right lane behind you, and they swerve all the way around you and decide, I'm getting off on this exit right here. And they almost cause an accident or an incident with you. They're the arrogant ones that think, yes, that because I took it and it worked, it should be good for you as well. But little 411, why do we have this big deal in schools with peanut allergies where kids cannot take or eat any product with peanut butter in it?
Right. I'm just fine when I eat peanut butter, therefore you should be too. It's for the betterment if almost everyone else is okay. It's a good source, good healthy food source, so therefore you should just have to live with the consequences.
Absolutely.
Which is really not an okay thing to say, but yet, as you said, there are people who are just like that.
Yes, there are. And I personally don't like to be around or hang around people like that because they're a Debbie Downer and they just make you unhappy.
So I would like to jump on the Joe Biden train for just a bit longer in our conversation. A few things have come up over this last week. Some are extensions off the one of things we've been talking about, and some are new pieces of information. So something that has come up, we talked about Joe Biden's White House and the Secret Service's inability to find the cocaine owner. It turns out not only did they close the investigation right quick, but then they destroyed the evidence.
Well, then that disallows anybody on the outside from taking a look.
Ever
and ever.
Or if they had new technology and they could get a little micron of sweat and determine whose DNA it was, doesn't matter.
Well, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, chances are it's Hunter Biden.
Absolutely. So yes, they will, even if they were to figure out who on video it belonged to, there's no evidence to tie to them anymore, so it doesn't matter. Even if somebody were to admit to it, the evidence is gone. Keeping on the Joe Biden train, so a whistleblower has confirms that an attorney donated to Joe Biden in 2020 to his campaign, and it's the same attorney who refused to charge Hunter Biden. In one of the three U.S. attorneys who had jurisdiction to charge Hunter Biden. We had the one out of Delaware who did in fact charge, and that's where we get the misdemeanor cases that he's going to plead to. But there was one in California and Washington, D.C. And so we have Joe Biden donors, admitted donors, that aren't charging his son.
Well, that's probably just coincidence, because everybody that's political at one point in time in their career donates to a presidential campaign. It's just coincidence that this guy had the power to push a major case off to the side.
Absolutely. So something else going on in the Biden verse, in the Biden universe, is that there is a potential cover-up related to what has been going on with both Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. So the FBI, they're calling the FBI the place where evidence goes to die, although the Secret Service apparently partakes in that. But the FBI hid one of their documents, the FD 1023, which is where an informant corroborated what the investigators were finding, where Joe and Hunter Biden appear to have benefited from their international bribery scheme. So some people are saying, the FD 1023 doesn't matter because it was just a person's statement. There was no evidence. However, it actually was corroborated by evidence. Those two things independently ended up verifying that something was in fact happening. But the FBI did not turn that piece of evidence over to the attorneys investigating the corruption.
Of course not, because they have moles within the department that, for whatever reason, it's either anti-Trump, anti-Republican, or they're just pro-Democrat or pro-Biden 100%. Because this goes back to where? 2015?
Yes, it goes back to when Joe Biden was vice president. So look at how long this has been going on. Joe Biden was vice president last as of January 2017. So everything we're talking about happened in the years preceding that. And yet here we are. Even if it happened his last day in office, that is still over 6 years ago.
Right. And what happens after 5 years?
Yeah, we start to see the statute of limitations on a lot of these charges. And so you have it for IRS, you have it on a gun charge for Hunter Biden. Those are the ones that they got him, although it doesn't really feel like they got him on it. But the bribery, so it comes out that Hunter Biden strong-armed the Burisma people into giving money, and strong-armed Chinese officials or Chinese business owners, again, into giving money to the Bidens. And then at one point he says that the big guy or his dad is in the room with him, essentially saying he knows whether or not you're going to give the money or not that I've said this. And he said, there's no real evidence that Hunter Biden was in fact with his dad when he said that.
Yet there is a picture.
There is a picture of him in his dad's Corvette the day that he issued the demand for payment. Where is the Corvette kept?
It's kept in the family garage of the vacation home, right?
Where they spend all their time.
And would that be where all the documents were found?
That would be where all the classified documents No, sorry, that's not where they all were found. That's where some of them were found because they were found spread across the United States.
Yes,
But some of them were
therefore
there.
someone that did not have authorization to remove classified documents from a SCIF or from the White House or from his residence had documents, known documents, that, here we go once again, DOJ, FBI is refusing to treat it the same. Or actually, people keep saying, why is it not treated the same as what they did to Trump? Well, it actually shouldn't be treated the same. It should be treated more severe because he was not a president. He did not have the right to declassify, nor was he allowed to take the stuff home.
And I'm wondering, I honestly don't know the full extent of presidential authority, although sometimes it seems like we are in a kingdom or a dictatorship. Can the president just say that a document, boom, I deem it declassified at any point in time, or is there a process? Can somebody come back and say, no, Mr. President, this document cannot be declassified? It could harm United States interests. It can harm a foreign country. It can harm an asset. Is there, if the president said, and I don't mean Trump, I mean even Biden, could Obama have done it? Could any president say, no, this document is declassified?
Well, I would think that
regardless,
if you look at a pyramid, the president is the one that's at the very top, supposedly. However, I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe they can declassify pretty much anything.
And then is there, if the president has the authority to declassify just about anything or anything, can he also say that the process to declassify is me waving my magic pencil, me waving my magic wand, me turning in my chair 3 times? Like, can he make up a process? Does it have to follow a specific process? Does it have to go through if it doesn't have to go through anyone, does that mean it doesn't have to go through a process? Well, so if he just speaks to the air, any document I've ever seen is declassified.
Well, according to the person at the National Archives that turned in Trump, he's God or she's God.
Okay, so the National Archives are the gods and goddesses of classification, and they reign over the president.
Well, that's kind of the way we're looking at it, because supposedly the documents that he had were more secure than what the vice president had.
Oh, you mean sitting off to the side somewhere in a garage that is opened, maybe not every day, every week?
Right, with a drug-using son having free reign of the house and the Corvette and probably every document that was there.
And that was his listed residence for a while, too.
Yes. And apparently one of the documents, or a handful of documents, he plagiarized and used to send an email to someone to extort money from them.
Yes, and now we have the GOP who's looking into Biden. And it really bothers me. It does. Like, the GOP has to be the one to look into Biden, or the Dems have to be the ones to look into Trump. Like, if there's a problem, they all should be saying this puts egg on our face. This makes us all look bad. But instead, we have to wait until the House is full of GOP members in order to look into it. So they're estimating now that $100 million flowed through the Biden family accounts because they would break it up over multiple family members.
I believe that to be true, especially because you have 2 independent entities. You had the 2 IRS agents, the whistleblowers, which apparently there's more than just them 2. They're the only 2 that have come out so far.
Because they're going to destroy them.
Yes. Well, they figured between the 2 of them approximately $20 to $30 million or more went through those bank accounts that they could find in their investigation, even with evidence being withheld from them. And the House committee that's looking into the Bidens came up with almost the same number, give or take a couple million. So I would say that there is not just some corruption there. that there is not an appearance that there's corruption. There is corruption. And Biden being the man, I don't care about statute of limitations. If he sold this country out for cash to communist China and to Ukraine, and by the way, side note, that's why we're giving money to Ukraine, according to some experts, is the fact that they're blackmailing him.
So money went into their pockets, but now that he's president, he has to pay up.
Yes. He's reciprocating and following what he had promised he would do at the cost of a lot of lives.
A lot of lives. The U.S. taxpayer. Oh, by the way, all of those weapons we've been sending over there, the troves and troves of weapons to help out Ukraine, guess who's benefiting from that? Not just our friendly neighborhood makers of the weapons.
Who be that?
Oh, well, just the cartel-like members who are pilfering the weapons and then selling them on the black market.
No, they do that?
They do that.
Wow.
So both Ukrainian and Russian have been taking those arms, mostly Ukrainian, and selling them on the black market. So it's not getting into the hands of the government who's doling it out to the military members. They are getting on the black market. So we are funneling guns to the country. It's going to the black market, and they are making money off the U.S. taxpayers.
Corruption at its finest, isn't it?
100%.
That's why we create these crazy policies, because these politicians are in bed with these people, and it's just a vicious cycle that I keep saying that after this group's out, it'll continue with the next group.
Absolutely. It will wash, rinse, repeat.
Well, we're going to listen to not Bob Alinsky, but one of Hunter's other business associates this week before a House subcommittee. And as long as he doesn't take the Fifth Amendment 1,400 times and he actually tells the truth, this could either make or break this whole case.
I think even if he tells the truth, they're going to say that he had a reason to do so, and it was just to hurt his former business partner, therefore...
And potentially keep himself out of prison?
Yes.
What a tangled web they weave.
What? Absolutely.
There's two things that are pretty incredible about this podcast. Well, one and one half.
And what are those 1 1/2 things that are pretty incredible about this podcast?
The one is the person sitting to the left of me. The 1/2 is the person sitting to the right of you. And the fact that we get to sit and bloviate as much as we want. But a lot of the stories that we look at and we talk about, we have to rely on sources to tell the truth.
Yes.
And we hope that while we go after multiple sources, that the bulk of them or a majority of them are truth tellers, and we are able to pass on the truth, speak the truth, and know what the truth is, if that makes sense.
Yes, because there will be times where a story catches like wildfire and it appears to be the truth. And if you look at the Steele dossier and Trump-Russia collusion, that was billed as truth for, about 3 to 5 years? Started cracking at like the 3, I think, but by 5 it was finally undone. But that was at the end of a presidency. So there were a lot of sources that claimed it was truth. So we do try to use our discernment in who the source is, what the sources are.
And wouldn't you think somebody like a sitting U.S. congressman who's vying to be a senator would actually want to tell the truth, and that people that are his constituents and would vote for him when he runs, when the open election is here for Senate, that they would want somebody that tells the truth as well?
You would think so. Someone who made it a large career move for them, talking about bringing Trump down over Trump-Russia collusion, shouting it off the highest mountain, shouting it off the D.C. hilltop, so to speak, was found to be a liar because he would say, I've seen the evidence.
And being only one of about a dozen congressmen or women that have been censured over the last few decades. But it's interesting that there's multiple people running on the Republican side to vie for president of the United States. And he has raised more money than most of the presidential candidates in a quarter cycle.
Lots of money. Lots of dark money, too.
Yes.
I never realized on both sides just how much dark money there is.
Because of that prestige and power and how much money they can make in the end. That's why I say it's all about the end game. It's not about the beginning. The beginning, they have somebody help them bully their way through to get elected. And once they're in, they're in.
Yes.
They're golden.
Yeah, so another one that I saw is our Supreme Court justices being either headliners or special guests, so you can do the meet and greet and the shake hands with at a lot of top level, high end. They're not meetings. They're not technically galas. They're not technically fundraisers because that would violate ethics. But there's a group that charges $10,000 a year for, that's how much you have to pay, but then they say that you'll end up meeting really top people. And one of the headliners at their annual, I don't even know if it was an annual thing because they try to get multiple meetings, but one of their headliner handshaker talk to was Justice Alina Kagan. And apparently while he was a judge on the circuit court, but not yet appointed to the Supreme Court, Justice Kavanaugh was also present. So money can buy you a meet and greet with a Supreme Court justice, even though that's not supposed to be about the haves and the have-nots with access to a Supreme Court justice. And even people who had business with the court or potential future business with the court, same thing, meet and greet.
Well, it makes you wonder sometimes when you look at the development of this country, even though it is one of the best countries on the planet. There's good potential for pretty much every human here within the United States borders. But I asked you this before, are we the greatest country in the world? Do we have the greatest leadership or the best leadership that we could potentially have?
We definitely do not have the best leadership.
Was our Constitution really written for everyone? Is the intent then in line with the outcomes we're seeing now? So we're seeing people make money hand over fist doing meet and greets. We're seeing former presidents doing fundraisers or going to a book signing or giving a speech and knocking down $100,000 in an hour. When you have, or less, when you have firefighters, and I'm just going to throw these out because to me they're the ones that are in harm's way most of their career. You have firefighters, police officers, you have military men and women who are on the front lines. You even have, even your Walmart security guard or your, Target or JCPenney security guard has the potential to get injured because somebody will perceive that badge that they're wearing as something to go after.
An armed officer.
Yes, an armed officer, thank you. And you have people in D.C. that because they are able to speak, whether they took public speaking or not, they have the gift of gab, as some people say. They can work their way into a position that over time nets them millions of dollars. I don't think that was the original intent of how our founding fathers saw this working.
Well, it wasn't, in part, like our representatives were supposed to be part-timers.
Oh, what's that? What did you just say? Our what?
Representatives.
Oh, okay, thank you. Our representatives.
They were supposed to be part-timers. The idea was that there wasn't so much that the feds needed to do overall. And so being part-timers is where it was at. They weren't supposed to make a career and that be their only money. They were supposed to have other jobs, other interests in their communities, by and large, and then they would go and represent the populace for a short period of time. And then we turned it into this very big job, bringing down now 6 figures.
And one thing I've never really looked at is representatives of the past to see how many during the advent of the country and the founding and the first set of senators and the first set of congressmen, how many terms they served. Was it 1, 2, 3, or was it like Pelosi and them that have done decades worth of serving, which has done what? It's enriched them. Whether her husband is a broker or an investor, or he has a college degree at Yale or Harvard, that insider information has netted them probably $100 million or more than they traditionally would have earned as just being a regular Joe working for a financial institution.
Absolutely. So one last thing on Joe Biden that I will bring up is apparently, so conspiracy theory time, his re-election campaign is almost non-existent. They are doing stuff here and there, but as far as the usual size of a re-election campaign, someone who's got all of the money and the backing that he does, they are, I think someone said, about 1/8 of where Barack Obama was when he was running for re-election on money spent. And apparently they're even borrowing the space, not renting, but I believe it's like a free space that they're using for his re-election campaign, where Barack Obama had a huge re-election site that he was paying for. And so it's kind of interesting that they're not spending a whole lot of this money, and there's not a very large re-election campaign actually happening.
Well, because if you listen to the pundits, aka the experts, he's not going to be the one running.
Right. So that's the conspiracy, is that he already knows it. They already know it. So they're spending enough money to make an appearance, but they're not spending so much that they can't then give that money away to whoever's going to be.
I know this guy's a multimillionaire, and I'll call him a nut job because I think he's a nut job. Who's the guy that talked about Sandy Hook and was sued for like $1 billion? Or something.
Yeah,
like
he
that.
lost $1 billion.
He lost the lawsuit because he said it was a government conspiracy. I heard him say on a podcast here a few days ago that Biden will have an aneurysm or he'll check out. He will not be the presidential candidate.
Alex Jones
for this next cycle.
Yeah, he's a big conspiracy person, but conspiracy not based in reality, because there's a lot of conspiracies out there that are pretty close to what appears to be reality. So you say, hey, I think that something else is going on here, and then eventually conspiracy turns out to be true.
Right. And that's my kind of conspiracies. Like you go back to Vietnam and they said, oh, Agent Orange was not bad, it did not kill. Well, the conspiracy was, yes it is. Well, it turned out to be true. But like you and I have said multiple times, they waited to run out the clock, so a lot of the guys and gals were dead, so it didn't matter. Okay, same thing with the Tuskegee Airmen. Same thing with all the testing with syphilis, and then they wouldn't allow doctors to treat them. Oh, well, that's just a conspiracy. No, it turned out to be true. They ran Navy ships up and down the Bay of San Francisco, spraying a chemical into the air so it would drift downwood so it would get people sick, so they could see what the end result was. Conspiracy, yes, people said, oh, that didn't happen. Yes, it did. They say contrails don't happen. Those things are fake. Well, if they did that in the Bay, and they did that with Agent Orange, and they did that with syphilis, oh, and by the way, the thing that was created in a lab, but that thing, that's just one lab, because that thing's been duplicated and recreated in multiple labs. And that's just a thing that's gotten out.
Right. It was just a conspiracy that the wet market also happened to be in the same location as a laboratory that was looking into said thing.
And when you're one of those statistical experts and you're a good investigator and you follow the trail of where the first people really got sick and how the thing all played out, the conspiracy turned out to be pretty much true. That it happened in the lab. They may not have been working on a bioweapon. They may have been legitimately trying to find a reverse engineered cure for one of these things if it was to be released into the population, or could have been population control. Nobody will know for 50 years. But what I do know is you and I on this podcast continually said we need the empirical data. Don't jump right into this thing. Don't go get vaccinated before you understand what the potential side effects and risks are. And we were called conspiracy nuts like all the others. We didn't know what we were talking about. We needed to take it because I took it. It was good for me. It should be good for you. Well, I have news for you. Start reading all the medical research. All the current peer-reviewed studies say that the side effects are far more serious than people ever thought. They should have never recommended giving this stuff to kids from 13 or 14 years old on down to young youth, that they were way out of bounds, and there's probably side effects that are going to happen for another 50 to 75 years, just like when a pandemic happened during World War I-ish, when after it was supposedly over is when multiples of people started to die and find out that there was more crap wrong with them than they thought.
100%. And I personally know individuals who routinely and repeatedly said, we need to follow what China is doing. China is doing it right. United States is doing it wrong. Not just with getting a shot, but also the measures that they took in order to combat it, because they had such a low death rate in comparison to the United States, that for whatever reason, this medical haven of the United States, at the forefront of everything medical, for the most part, somehow could not take care of its people. While the real numbers accidentally got posted in a particular province recently, and it was online for long enough for the news to catch it. And then they started reporting about it, and then the local website went down because it was for a local province. So they had claimed in China that only a total of 83,700 people died throughout the entirety of the pandemic. Ultra low number for a country that has over 1 billion people. However, new data shows that in one province alone, they saw 72,000 plus an increase in excess deaths during the first quarter of this year alone compared to the same period last year. Now, what's different? They all got mandated to take the shot. It's not just about what you did when the pandemic was happening. What did you do when the shot was created? Now they have such a high number of excess deaths. The 70% increase in excess deaths of the province of roughly 65 million people. And then when you extrapolate that across the entire country of nearly 1.5 billion people, there would be an estimated 1.5 million excess deaths for just the first 3 months of the year.
Correct. And two things. Number one, I wouldn't trust most communist countries. So whichever folks are listening to them better open their eyes up, because what does a communist country like China do under their current regime system that doesn't like another ethnic group?
Ethnic cleansing.
They ethnically cleanse like they're doing right now with the
Uyghur Muslims. And if you're Christian, they're also going after you, although that's a little less apparent, a little less noticeable, because they've rounded up the entire population of the Uyghur Muslims, at least all the ones that they could identify and find and put together.
And what did they do to the poor Cubans in Cuba? when Castro and Che took over. They didn't like you if you didn't toe the communist line. They locked you up in prison forever. What do they do in Venezuela? Communists took over. They kill the opposing parties. So don't trust them. And that excess death thing is happening worldwide right now. It's happening big time in Europe. It's happening in Australia. And there is quite a bit of excess death in the U.S. They're just not talking about it.
Yeah, we stopped talking about it at a certain point. So we don't want to make Biden or any of the medical elites in this country look bad. So we just quit talking about it. And if you try to bring it up, they shut you down. Again, as a conspiracy theorist or someone who doesn't understand, doesn't have the appropriate medical knowledge to be making those statements.
There's the old conspiracy thing again. I'll have another conspiracy for you.
What is that?
How many people do you know that have committed suicide?
Just a couple.
Me as well. Interesting thing is we rolled that tape to the Clintons, and there's above 50.
Yeah, they have over 4 dozen for sure.
Yes.
At last count, but I don't know if people are still tallying it all up.
And then I don't know if the Obamas have become really good friends with the Clintons and they kind of run their business now like the Clintons do. But unfortunately, Obama's chef was paddleboarding and he drowned next to the president's Martha's Vineyard estate.
So I read that whomever he was with said that they were paddleboarding, and then this gentleman just fell off his board, went under, and did not surface.
Well, hopefully it wasn't because he served a bad meal to the Obamas. And I'm just kidding, people. It's very unfortunate that this young man died. Hopefully he was right with the man and he went to the right place.
Yes. So let's talk about some things going on, other things going on politically. So something that we have here in the United States is a pretty porous border, especially along our southern border, but that does not make our northern border perfect.
Lies. Most secure border in the history of this country.
In the history of peopling, it's the most secure border.
Yes. We have not let one person through that we didn't want to let through.
So Texas put up a floating wall, and the federal government is demanding that Texas take it down. The federal government is demanding that Texas not do anything to secure its own border. And then different states are complaining when Texas then ships the people who come across the border to other states because they say it's Texas' problem. So Texas apparently is expected to not take care of itself, and we also don't have a problem at the border. The floating wall would do nothing if there was no one who was crossing. So we do have a nice porous border. We have catch and release happening if people are caught and they are issued summonses or they're told to go visit ICE when they get to their final location. So just before, we are seeing that they are not actually, in fact, visiting ICE. So ICE did not issue court summonses in more than 80% of the cases where the person actually showed up to the facility. So even when you had CBP telling them to go to ICE, a bunch of people just won't show up. They'll be paroled in and then they'll go off to their final destination and not present themselves to ICE. But even those who did check in with ICE were released by ICE and not given a notice to appear in front of an immigration judge. Why is that problematic? Well, for me, one thing that I see is problematic if a person has a true case. For instance, they're claiming asylum or they have things that can make them eligible to eventually get a green card or get their permanent resident card if they have some sort of access to status. By not being given a court date, by not being able to go in front of the judge, they lose that ability to get that status. So people who are showing up, people who are going to ICE, the expectation is they get a court date, but instead ICE is not giving them anything and shooing them off.
Who runs ICE?
Well, it's under the Department of Homeland Security, and the head of the Department of Homeland Security is Alejandro Mayorkas.
He should be fired.
100%.
Censured, impeached, whatever it
Impeached.
takes. I know. Impeach
100%. I'm just saying he needs to be impeached.
Remove him. But you remove him, as long as you have the same party in power, then you just put another
you get the same
like-minded individual in there.
Absolutely.
See, here's the problem that you and I talk about with these things coming up from south of the border, coming down from north, east or west, is there's no accountability because these politicians do not interact with these people. The people that it affects are the ones that suffer. So Mayorkas, and unfortunately most of the chain of command underneath him, will never run across a hostile immigrant. They'll never run across a drug dealer. They'll never run across the Oxycontin or any of the other drugs that are coming up south of the border. So they don't care. They simply don't care. What they see is eventually at some point in time, someone in D.C. will anoint them U.S. citizens, probably like Reagan did when he threw in their 1 or 2 million.
Yeah, he did 2 programs.
Yes.
That allowed people to ultimately get permanent resident cards and then eventually citizenship. And in fact, when I moved from the Southern California office up to Fresno, and I was talking to individuals who actually worked those cases back in the 80s, they said that they didn't understand essentially how stupid, sorry for those immigration officers out there, how stupid you could be to accept documentation on types of fruit picking or vegetable picking that was clearly forged because that fruit or vegetable was out of season. Could not be picked during the time that the person claimed that they were there picking that fruit or vegetable. They said they saw it a lot in the Fresno office, so they would gather up all the people that were essentially lying because you can't pick that said fruit or vegetable during the wrong season, or that farm was down for that period of time. And they knew it because they were local. But then you had all these rubber stampers at the service center who were just like, oh, okay, this person said they picked something, looks good, approved. So a bunch of people actually got status off of fraud paperwork.
And isn't it amazing, though, how many people will do whatever it takes to get status and to come here at all costs? But then that creates a voting block for one party or the other, and we know which party predominantly gets the voting block. But that just shows you how messed up our system is, how long it's been messed up, and it's obviously the leadership that doesn't want to fix it because there's some gain they're getting by not legitimately repairing it. Just a thought.
Just a thought. Well, going on with some of these individuals who are not lawfully present here in the United States. So there was a picket line for illegal immigrants who are demanding free housing, paid job training. I guess it wasn't a picket, it was a protest from Chicago. So they're protesting there in Chicago, and they are demanding that they be given everything for free. That they need to be housed, they need to be fed, they need it all, and you owe it to them.
Culture of freebies.
Gimme. We've made the show for gimme. We certainly have. Yeah, I just thought that where else in the world can you go? Illegally enter a country and then demand everything from them?
Nowhere. Because that was tried in Australia when they started getting a lot of people coming in on boats and stuff that wanted to immigrate there or just come there legally or illegally. And they actually boated them back up, turned them around and ran them off saying, hey, number one, we're full. Number two, we have enough problem with illegal activities without bringing more, without importing it. So please, thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah. Well, New York, they are trying that. They were trying the free housing thing, sheltering, clothing. Now they're saying that there's no more room for migrants. Our cup has runneth over. Do you get to say that to Texas? Does Arizona get to say that? Does New Mexico get to say that? Although people don't, they're not really.
No, because
we don't hear about New Mexico.
It's all about me. They just care about them.
But they don't. Yeah, New York cares about New York. But when they say we're a place for everybody, and then when everybody is delivered on a silver platter, they don't seem to be happy with everybody.
Just like Martha's Vineyard.
They're not happy either.
You know who else isn't happy? Can I bounce over to another topic?
Yes. Yes, you can.
So one of the gentlemen I started to follow because he has a lot of interesting things to say is RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy. Originally did not want to bring up the Biden corruption in his campaign because his issues as they relate to helping the American people were more important than wasting his time. Well, now he has pivoted on the corruption allegations, calls for a real investigation following recent developments. And I would bet you a big part of that is because he is still being censored by Facebook and Instagram and other news outlets that will not give him airtime, and they do not want to hear what he has to say. Why? Why do they not want to hear it? Because he's already rising in the polls, and he has the real potential to be the nominee.
So he's got to do what he's got to do.
Well, I thought this was supposed to be about the people. I thought the people were supposed to decide who they want to run for an office, and then when you have that election, the person with the most votes wins. Now we have news media outlets, we have other politicians, and we have outside sources and entities dictating to us, which they've done the last 3 election cycles, who is to be our president, vice president, and down the chain.
Yes, and the fact that you bring that up. So they did just do a meeting in Congress over censorship. RFK Jr. was invited along with other individuals, and what happened before that could get started? They attempted to remove RFK Jr. from being present and said that they wanted to go behind closed doors, essentially, because they didn't want it broadcast out that he was a terrible, horrible, awful, bad guy, and he should never be given any airtime, essentially. So going with what you said, not getting any airtime, even if it's in front of Congress, over being censored. And so they tried to censor RFK Jr. on the topic he was there to speak about, which was being censored. Kind of seems to lend credence to the fact that even our representatives are attempting to censor others. So we saw that, and we see Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, not as much anymore, but take people down and censor what they don't want to have out in the public square. We have another Democrat who's just come out and said that the government should be the ones who get to say what the truth is, and then only that truth can be put out there, and you're not allowed to bring up the other side.
Is that like UFOs? Is the government hiding something?
Yeah, so that's the only thing that we're allowed to know.
That's right. The government will be your thoughts, your prayers, and your dreams.
Apparently. So there's something for that. And we know that there was direct access between federal government employees and the Biden administration contacting directly the social media platform was to say what they wanted taken down. Even if it was true, they said, oh, this could be harmful, take it down. And right now we're being sold this grandiose idea here in California that electric vehicles are it. Cream of the crop.
I'm going to buy 2 of them.
Now our government, whether it's UFOs, whether it's pieces of the truth, the not truth, we were allowed to talk about the Steele dossier 100% for 5 years. It turned out not to be truth, never censored.
And they knew from the beginning it was fake.
They knew that. They knew Hunter Biden laptop had been authenticated by the FBI in 2019, well before it came out in the New York Post
right, and
article.
And we talked about conspiracy theories and truth and people you have to trust to get your news and information from. And I had heard a little tidbit from someone that is now gone off the planet. That was the second laptop that the FBI had. Number 2.
And I'm not surprised about that. I'm really not surprised that that wouldn't be the only one. But on the meetings with, I believe it was Facebook, they specifically asked if it was real or not, the laptop. Initially, an FBI person said it was authentic, but then everything after that was no comment, not going to comment. And they censored it, so they censored the truth. So if the federal government is our only source for truth, they want to be the only source for truth, the government will tell you what's good for you. We will not be good as a nation.
That's why I'm here to tell you, as just a simple guy, that this artificial intelligence thing that's coming along is very dangerous for this country. You know how dangerous it is?
How dangerous is it?
So they have a little study that they did with an artificial intelligence little robot that was loading packages, moving packages back and forth. Have you heard this story?
Is that the one that offed itself?
Yeah, it realized that it was going to have a terrible life moving packages, so it shut itself off.
It decommissioned itself, yes. I did hear about that. Like, I don't want to move packages. So going back to electric vehicles and the government telling us just how amazing electric vehicles are, we talked about it this winter where vehicles weren't charging because it was too cold, or they weren't holding a good enough charge, dying sooner because of the cold. Now, with our extreme heat, we're being told that the batteries aren't holding their charge because it's too hot. So if they don't drive, and if you don't drive and live in the perfect temperature,
stay home.
You're going to have a low range, not a long range, a low range battery. So too hot, too cold, it will not work for you.
So what we're saying is don't get rid of fossil fuels just yet. We have not perfected the technology as it relates to lithium batteries.
No, we have not.
And we do not have the grid nor the infrastructure. We don't have enough panels up yet to steal electricity from the sun to charge our electric cars.
Right, and we're adopting, or supposed to adopt at such a high rate, we will not have the infrastructure. We already have days where they tell us not to charge our vehicles during prime charging time. It takes a lot of these vehicles overnight to charge. And so if you get home, don't plug it in until way late, so you're not going to get enough charge overnight. Too bad, so sad.
I know we're kind of bouncing back and forth between a couple, 3 different topics, but I just happened to pop one up that just goes right to what we just said a couple minutes ago about accuracy and reporting and making sure that empirical data and items like that are checked and verified so you get the right story. And here we have an article that the Defense Department's COVID-19 data is unreliable.
It's unreliable. If it's the Defense Department has unreliable data, what about the rest of us?
It's not complete. It's not accurate or representative of all DoD patients who experienced a COVID event.
Probably because they didn't accurately report it as they were told not to. Conspiracy.
Or not.
So let's talk about consequences. Or should there be any consequences? Recently, there was an airline employee. I'm not going to say the airline, but there was an airline employee where the airline hired its own investigator to figure out what happened to this airline employee who died on the job. So they were on a tug, and that tug ran into a jet bridge.
Tell our listeners what a tug is and what it does.
So a tug is a vehicle that tows planes on the tarmac.
And pulls baggage carts.
And it can also pull baggage carts, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So this 37-year-old gentleman was driving this tug, and the vehicle crashed into a jet bridge. So the airline hired its own investigator to figure out what happened, and the airline investigator told the police, because the investigator shows up and also talked to the police, but told the police that they obtained information overnight, so between the incident and the next day, that indicated that it was a suicide and not an accident. The police still did their investigation. And it turns out that this tug had been deemed inoperable multiple times because the gas pedal would get stuck and it would veer off to the right. And so the employee said, no, this tug has had a lot of problems. And then as the police did their investigation, the medical examiner did their investigation, they found that the death was an accident. Now, what would happen if a company, let's not even say it's an airline, but if a company had an accident on their site versus if a company had a suicide on their site? If the individual committed suicide, ultimately the company would probably not pay out any monies
or life insurance that the company may carry.
But if it was an accident, there might be some liability issues depending on what role the employee played in said accident.
Well, if the tug, I can tell you from firsthand experience, because that's right in my wheelhouse. It's actually what I do for a living. If the tug was tagged out and the employee jumped on the tug, removed the tag or left the tag on, started the tug up, knowing this tug had known issues, he has a percentage of responsibility. But that does not take away from the fact that the company allowed this piece of equipment to break multiple times. It did not either permanently take it out of service or outsource to a different repair shop that could actually fix the tug so it was safe to operate for all employees. Because that's the end goal. It's the end goal with our airlines, to make sure that we're 100% safe and our employees are safe in the operation day to day, and our passengers have a pleasurable experience. So there is some accountability there, and the accountability, if it was an accident that they're trying to hide, then it's on the company's dole. If the employee knew, then he has a percentage of responsibility as well, like I said. And for those of you non-flying public, a jet bridge is a device that
it connects up where you congregate just before you load onto the plane, and then you walk down the jet bridge onto the plane. So it connects up where you sit, your waiting area, up to the airplane.
And it's a big heavy duty structure that's built with big wheels, big steel. So if he hit that and impacted at a speed, I can see him getting bucked off and hitting his head, breaking his neck, or whatever happened to the individual.
Yeah, so I just thought it was interesting that there would be a hired investigator that would reach their conclusion in less than 24 hours. It could also be a problem with the investigator that they hired for the job.
He was a metaphorical hitman. He was hired by the company to come up with that result in a hurry, I believe.
So let's go back to politics for a bit. A few things have come up recently, and we've heard a lot about the various ways they've gone after Trump after he got out, even while he was in office, but after he got out of office, how they are looking for any which way they can to take him down. And so we've seen it over the classified document scandal, among others. So now the feds have gone and seized a lawyer's phone and a strategist's phone. They were the lawyer and strategist for Trump. They have seized their phones, and they say it's surrounding a probe of January 6th. While I understand that they're looking for conspiracies or how they played a role in it, because that's been the claim that even though Trump was publicly saying, this is not who we are, we don't do this, stay peaceful, all of that, he posted it on Twitter, and he was telling his people, don't do this. the claim is that behind the scenes, he was helping to orchestrate with his people the overrun of the Capitol. That's been the claim for a couple of years now. So now the feds have seized the phones of a lawyer and an advisor. Now, where is it acceptable for a Biden government to seize the phone of the lawyer for his biggest potential Republican contender?
It's not, and that should be attorney-client privilege there. So you should be able to return the favor when you're in office and go after all these guys in kind. Biden made that comment more than once that Trump will not run again. He will see to it he will use every means necessary. Well, that's strong arm Mafia style tactics, which is exactly what him and his son and his brother used against other countries. You know, maybe when I said, how could a lowly little guy from where he's from become so powerful? Maybe I was wrong all this time. Maybe he's been a Mafia don, or he's been part of this thing the entire time. He's just good at hiding it.
He's been hiding it for longer under his friendly, not so friendly stance of being the middle guy.
Yes.
The guy that's going to level with everybody and be in the middle.
Yeah, and in reality, he's been the big fraud the whole time.
So another thing our government is doing, and I'm not sure if you heard this, but in the FISA court, they spied on a U.S. senator, a state senator, and a judge.
During this current administration?
October of 2022, June of 2022, yes. So during this current administration. By the way, do you know what FISA or the other one is the FISC stands for?
Tell me.
So FISA itself is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act.
Yes, to go after people outside of the country.
And the FISC for the court is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. So you have FISC, but more commonly we refer to FISA because it's the actual act. Section 702 of the act is what these were queried under: the U.S. senator, the state senator, and the judge.
Yes, and you're supposed to be able to listen if you have probable cause to foreigners outside of the country, but if it happens to boomerang back into the country or you inadvertently pick up a U.S. citizen, you are supposed to strike all that information, warehouse it or delete it and throw it away.
Yeah, so in this case, some of the violations of the querying standard coincided with a failure to follow an FBI policy that requires prior deputy director approval to use sensitive query terms. The examples given were identifiers of domestic public officials, domestic political candidates, members of the news media, academics, religious organizations, or prominent persons within them. So they did not meet the reasonably likely to retrieve standard according to the FBI policy. So you have an analyst who conducted 4 queries of information using the last names of a U.S. senator, the state senator, and no further limitations. So they didn't try to limit out these individuals' last names. Because obviously if you said Biden, but you were looking into someone completely unrelated to Joe Biden, you wouldn't just query a Joe Biden and say, oh, well, I wasn't looking at the president. Yep. So we can query our U.S. citizens. We can query our senator, state senator, judge. No big deal.
I do believe that they being the FBI queried over 250,000 to 500,000 U.S. citizens because that was talked about in a select subcommittee meeting within the last 2 weeks. And I believe it was brought up by a judge somewhere that was a strict no-no.
And they are doing it anyway because they can. Because what happens? Oh, our bad. We didn't follow standards. Sorry, we won't let it happen again. And then what do? They let it happen again.
They just find a different door or window to climb into to do it again.
So let's talk about our military. A few things going on with our military.
We still have a military?
We still, it's hanging on by a thread. I will say not a whole lot of people are wanting to join our military, and it doesn't hold the same prestige that it used to. Serving one's country, You have that who's better, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, Coast Guard, and now we have Space Force. Obviously, you can tell I was in before there was a Space Force. And you just had this, you still had camaraderie, but you kind of had that who's better than whom, and everybody, oh, I'm joining the Marines because I perceive them to be better. I'm joining the Navy, family history, love it. I perceive them to be better, etc. But in other news, not in having joined or why we can't seem to get enough people, a new measure has been added to the defense bill. We'll see if it sticks. That says court-martial convictions would need a unanimous jury verdict under this new measure. And so that's something that our folks out there might not have realized is you can get convicted in the military on a split decision. It does not have to be unanimous. So this amendment that has been proposed, and it was approved with a voice vote as a part of a package of proposals considered non-controversial, would change one of the last ways the military justice system differs from civilian court. And so it's a reform that Congress has been doing. It will be interesting if it does in fact stick, so that will change how court-martials and their outcome are held.
I wonder if you can appeal past convictions, and if it's going to be like marijuana usage, and the fact that a lot of it's legal now and a lot of people are getting out of jail or they're having their sentences expunged and all that because they're making it retroactive.
Yeah, I'd have to go look at the actual verbiage to see if it includes a retroactive intent or if it's only future facing.
Future faces and places.
Yes. So another piece of military family news is there is a new Gerber baby. And that new Gerber baby is the child of, I don't want to say a child of the Air Force, but Air Force parents.
Very cool.
The 2023 contest winner is a 10-month-old military baby.
That is cool. It's about time. I didn't like that other Gerber baby.
Ha ha.
Just kidding.
Yeah, so the child's father happens to be a lieutenant colonel and an Air Force Academy graduate.
Not an officer's daughter.
An officer's daughter. Wish it was enlisted,
Oh, no.
But that's okay.
Though.
Cute kid.
Yeah, the baby is not able to pick her dad's career.
Couple more things in military news. So the Coast Guard has a top official, Admiral Linda Fagan. So female top official. She was confirmed, I believe, last year to be the head of the Coast Guard. Something that has unfortunately been going on in the Coast Guard is sexual assault and the lack of reporting, or that the victim is oftentimes targeted afterwards if they do report. So this has been a problem, unfortunately, in the Coast Guard for over 30 years. It has been an ongoing problem they've been attempting to address. And as they said that they've been addressing it and it's getting better. So CNN did an investigation into the Coast Guard's failure to respond to reports of sexual assault and harassment at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. And the commandant, who is Admiral Linda Fagan, announced a 90-day review of service policies, culture, and practices to ensure the safety of its members. And so she gets called, of course, in front of Congress, and they're looking into the who's, the what's, the why's, how did this happen, and how does it continue to happen. And so CNN actually had looked into things before, where there was a 2014 case of an academy graduate who said her allegations of rape were never investigated. So then in 2014, they did a investigation, and they found 60 substantiated cases of rape, sexual assault, and harassment by cadets or at the academy from 1988 through 2006. So a continual, perpetual problem there. But why I'm bringing this up this gal, this woman, this admiral, is the first female leader of the Coast Guard, first commandant, female commandant, in its history, in the whole history. They've had a problem, a known problem, since at least the 80s. Came to light in 2014 just how much bigger the problem was. Allegations have gone on in the academy 80s, 90s, and so forth. But yet we want to blame the first female
going to use
commandant.
her as a scapegoat.
Yes. And so I am bothered by that.
I would be too. I am bothered by that as well. And it's unfortunate that it's been going on that long and they haven't addressed it and fixed it. But I'll give you a little interesting tidbit to go along with that. Do you know that most of these quid pro quo and sexual harassment classes and all this that goes on within the state level and the federal level is not because of us common little worker bees?
Somebody higher up.
It's because of the leadership that has the issues. And they hide it for years. Just saying.
Okay, so not related to this or the classes that we had to take, but speaking of problems that because of leadership, the little guys end up having to change, do something different, get punished, whatever it is. When I was in Pensacola, I think I've mentioned this story before, but when I was in Pensacola, we had a military officer jogging on base. We had a very small base, so some people would jog the perimeter as their workout. Jogged in front of a car and got hit. And it was their fault. They literally jogged in front of a moving vehicle. They were wearing headphones while jogging. So then almost immediately they come out with a new rule that if you're jogging on base, you can't wear headphones. But it only applied to enlisted.
Of course. We're always the problem.
Absolutely, we are the problem. We think we're the solution, but nobody listens to us.
No, people listen to us.
Well, I mean, people
I
for our
know.
podcast listen to us. Okay, so a few things going on. Going to bring it home to California. The Bay Area is currently looking at giving automatic tickets to speeders. So they want to put in traffic cameras that catch speeding so they can issue tickets much in the way of a red light camera, except they want to do it for speeding. So they're looking at making money by putting in automatic tickets for anyone going 11 miles an hour over the speed limit. Never have to talk to an officer. They'll mail you one.
Well, they tried that. I can't remember which city and county, but a city councilman or a mayor or some kind of position of authority like that was caught in the car with a girl, not his wife. And the picture was mailed to his house, and things happened after that, and miraculously all the cameras disappeared, stopped taking pictures.
Oh, interesting. Tickets. Well, this new pilot speed camera program would be implemented as soon as January 2024. So we're looking at it as of this coming January. And it would include San Jose, Oakland, Glendale, Los Angeles, Long Beach, and the city and county of San Francisco. So stay out of those places if you want to speed.
I'd say everywhere they have the speeders. Give them a ticket. And we're going to raise the fees to drive over the Golden Gate Bridge too.
And in addition, we want to have mandatory licensing and training for people who ride e-bikes.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
So there's a California bill that would require e-bikers to have a license and have mandatory training. Assembly Bill 530, if it is put into law as written, would prohibit people under the age of 12 from riding e-bikes, and it would require an online written test and state-issued identification for riders who do not have a driver license.
They go too fast.
So 13 and above. They're calling it long overdue because he sees young kids riding their e-bikes and it concerns him. This particular individual who works in Encinitas, Mr. Bob Cosgrove. A lot of kids just ride those recklessly. Many of them do not have helmets on, and it's concerning now that they have an increased speed to some degree because it's an e-bike and potentially going faster than that particular individual can pedal. But here's my thing. It is already illegal for an under 18 to ride a bike, whether it's an e-bike or a manual bike, without a helmet.
Yes, we already have a helmet law.
So, we see them riding without helmets. Okay, so they're already doing something illegal. What makes you think a law is going to now all of a sudden change them? Oh, I guess I'm not going to ride a bike because I don't have a permit. They're not going to pull the person over. You have to have a reason to pull somebody over, right? Police officers. We already are saying that certain things aren't even ticketable anymore. Certain things are not even arresting
like
for
drug
crimes.
use?
They're not arresting for crimes, but now you're saying, what are we just going to do spot checks on people with e-bikes? We're going to start pulling them all over, checking their licenses, checking to see if they have a permit, took an online test. How old are you, kid? Do you need a helmet?
Well, maybe it's he's a concerned father or grandfather. Maybe one of his kids or grandkids got hurt because they weren't following rules and wearing helmets. So he feels, like you and I say, that everybody else gets punished. So everybody has to toe the line.
Right. I just find it really interesting. Oh, people are already breaking the law. You know what the solution to people breaking the law is? Another law.
More laws. That'll fix it.
Laws will fix it all.
Fixes everything.
Well, that's California for you. That is absolutely California.
Well, we have the best governor in the history of governors, so.
Yeah, and another thing that's totally California. So a triple murderer, someone who murdered 2 women and their son, is now identifying as a woman. So this man who killed 2 women and their son is identifying as a woman, has completely intact male body, identifies as a woman, is now at a women's prison serving their life sentence, and harassing all of the women in the prison. Apparently is a pretty machismo, likes to let women know their place, is a chauvinist, and now forces the women to push him around in his wheelchair, making comments at them, telling them how he's better than them or she's better than them, etc. And any of the women who speak out about this happening are punished. They lose their prison jobs. If they had a prison job, there's a woman who spoke out against it, already lost her prison job. People who have been assaulted by similar individuals are suing the state because they've been assaulted, and now we are putting more individuals in prison with them because women aren't punished enough.
Only in California.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.